I'm back from a recent trip that I took out of the country. While the facility I was staying at would have an internet connection, the price for internet for a week was about $100 US. I'd rather go without a connection than pay that amount. While I didn't have access to the internet, I did have access to a local network, and I considered options on how to bring media with me. Rather than bring a few movies and songs here and there on my phone, I want to indiscriminately copy whatever I could to a drive. In addition to myself, there were 3 other people that were with me that might also want to have access to the media. It made sense to host the media on a pocket-sized web server. I set up a Raspberry Pi to do just that, and I took it with me. After the trip was over, I thought to myself that there should be some way to do the same thing in a more compact package. I started to look at what the smallest Raspberry Pi computer module-based setup would look like, and as I mentally constructed this solution, I realized it was converging to the same form factor as a phone. I've got plenty of old phones and tablets thing about. While I wouldn't suggest this is a general solution, since phones are a lot more expensive than a Pi, I want to have some fun with this, so I admit that some part of what I'm doing here is impractical, but I enjoy it. Now, there's various ways to run Node.js on a phone, and some other apps are in the App Store that let you host a web server on your phone. I didn't use any of these. Now, to get started, I created an Android project, and before writing any code, I wanted to declare a few permissions. I like to do this first, so that later on, I don't have to wonder why a specific call failed. The permissions that were added are for internet access, for accessing the Wi-Fi state, and for access to the wake lock to keep the device from suspending. For what I show here, only the internet capabilities are going to be used. Now you can choose to omit the other 2 permissions or not at your discretion. With these permissions in place, I started writing the code. There's only really 3 classes in this web server that contain any substantial amount of code. One is a class that I simply called WebServer, which listens for incoming requests and passes them off to be processed. I have another class called ClientSocketHandler, and it processes those incoming requests that were handed off by the WebServer class and composes a response. Now, the third class is actually an interface, IStatusUpdateReceiver, and this is just used for passing information back to the UI. Now, the WebServer class accepts in its constructor the port on which it should run, and a context object, which is needed for some other calls. A web server instance does not begin to listen for connections until the start method is called. Once it's started, the device retrieves the address of the Wi-Fi adapter and creates a socket that is bound to this address. A status message is also sent to the UI so that it can show the IP address. The class then creates a thread that it uses to listen for incoming connections. In the function listenThread, the class awaits an incoming connection. As soon as it receives one, it creates the new client socket handler with this socket and lets the client socket handler process the request and immediately goes back to listening for another connection. It doesn't wait for client socket handler to finish before waiting for the next connection. Now, within client socket handler, the class grabs the input stream to read the request from the remote client and the output stream for sending data back to the client. Now, I haven't implemented the HTTP protocol yet, but in HTTP, the client will send one or more lines that make up the request, followed by a blank line. For now, my client handler reads the input from the input stream until a blank line is encountered. Once received, it composes the response. I've got an HTML string that is going to be returned to the client. Now, this HTML string gets converted to a byte array, and I look at the size of this byte array. I need to know this size for populating the response header content length. Now, after I have this, I start constructing the header for the response. I went ahead and converted that to a byte array too. But then the 2 byte arrays are sent back to the client. Of course, first the header and then the content. And after this response is sent, the client's done all of its work and the socket can be closed. Now, the interface that I mentioned, IStatusUpdateReceiver, is currently only being used to communicate the IP address on which the server is running. Now, since the server runs in a different thread than the UI, before updating the UI, I have to make sure that any calls that are actually touching UI elements get marshaled back to the UI thread. If you look in the class MainActivity, you'll see that I create the web server instance in the activity. Now, I'm only doing this because this is a proof of concept. If you make your own application, implement this as a service so that it can run on its own thread. Now, I set the status receiver member of the web server to an anonymous class instance that does nothing more than update the IP address that's displayed in the UI. To call the setText function in the UI, I wrap my calls within the run on UI thread block. After this is set up, I call start and the web server gets things going. Now, I was happy my proof of concept worked. I haven't decided if I'm going to throw this away and continue working from this. In either case, there are a few things I want to have in whatever my next version of this is. I do absolutely no exception handling or cleanup in this code. And it needs to be able to time out a connection or refuse connections if it gets inundated. I also want my next version to do actual processing of the incoming HTTP request and serve up content that has been saved to the device's memory, such as a folder on the device's memory card. I've got a lot more work to do with this, and who knows, maybe I'll end up working this up to something that I feel like putting within the App Store. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see the code that I've written, you can actually find it on GitHub. Here's the URL to this project, and you can find this initial version of the code within this commit ID. Now, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. You can also find me on Twitter, and occasionally I'm also on Facebook. Usually whenever I'm working on a project, as I'm making incremental updates to it, I also start putting information about it on Instagram. So just remember to like and subscribe to me in all of those various channels. And until next time.